If you snore at night or you get hot when you sleep, check out our sponsor, 8 Sleep, who just released the Pod 4 Ultra. It can cool your bed down to 20 degrees below the room temperature so you get better sleep, or it can heat your bed up, and it can sense when you're snoring and lift your head so you can breathe better. It's truly amazing. I use an 8 Sleep pod every night. Once you try it, you'll understand how big of a difference it makes for sleep. Go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman for $350 off. The link is in the description. Welcome, everybody. The last few weeks have seen more major stories and significant changes to a presidential campaign in such a short period of time. Certainly more than any recent election in decades that I can recall. And this is continuing to move very, very quickly. And I know that the news I'm about to give you is going to be frustrating to some in my audience. Some of you are going to be angry, while I know many of you also are happy from the emails that I've received. As the discussion about whether there will be an open convention for the Democratic Party in a few weeks in Chicago, Illinois, has been growing, who would be the possible replacements to Joe Biden? What will their campaign be like to delegates? As all of that was building, it is functionally over. Now, hold on. I'll tell you the whole story. It is functionally over as Kamala Harris has secured enough delegates for the nomination. Reportedly coming as a surprise to the vice president on Sunday, when President Biden announced he would not seek re-election. She was reportedly not notified more than just minutes in advance. 48 hours later, not even really, more like 36, because this came last night, she has secured the delegates for the nomination, and some are saying we can now close the door on who will be Joe Biden's replacement. Others saying, no, we cannot. We will fight for the nomination. It should be someone else. Now, often the someone else is not even somebody who's remotely viable, and we will get to that in a moment. But let's talk about what happened. A reasonable question, of course, is how could it be over if the delegates haven't yet voted at the DNC? And that is a very good question. No delegates have voted, but with regard to verbal commitments, Kamala Harris has secured the number she needs. Reuters reports Vice President Kamala Harris will campaign in Wisconsin today after securing enough Democratic delegate support to clear a path to the nomination. Harris has emerged as the Democratic candidate after President Biden abandoned the re-election campaign. Less than 36 hours after Biden endorsed Harris, she secured the nomination Monday night by winning the pledged support of a majority of the party's delegates who will determine the nomination, the campaign said. Kamala Harris putting out a statement, which I will read to you in a moment. An unofficial survey of delegates by the Associated Press shows Harris with more than 2,500 delegates, well over the 1976 needed to win. Here's a critical line. Delegates could still technically change their minds, but nobody else received any votes in the AP survey. 54 delegates were undecided. Now, I know that there are people who are furious about this. I was getting text messages Sunday, Monday, one this morning from other hosts and different strategists and, people I've met over the years, most saying it seems as though this is over, and some saying this can't be over. We must demand a process. Now, here's the thing that makes this a more complicated situation. To demand a process can mean many different things. And of course, if other candidates put their names forward and lobby delegates and say, choose me instead.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
Right. I'm doing everything right. Please select me at the DNC. I think that that's all great. I'm supportive of that. We also can't strong arm delegates into choosing someone else when the someone else isn't even anybody clear. It's critical to understand that nobody at this point in a serious manner, and, I know we've got these third party candidates who are sometimes on the fringes of the Democratic Party, but they're not running as Democrats, but might they? We don't actually have any serious challenge from inside the Democratic Party to Kamala Harris right now. And so it would be a very different scenario if we right now had a 2-way, 3-way, 4-way, 5-way race where it's Kamala Harris and maybe it's Andy Bashir, and imagine that Pete Buttigieg came forward or Hillary Clinton came back and said, pick me, or the Republican dream of Michelle Obama. Or if you had announced challenges to Kamala Harris and if you had money coming into someone other than Kamala Harris, you would have a much more likely scenario of a so-called open convention with a contested nomination. We just don't have that right now. Now, you can point to the situation and say it was manipulated in order to prevent that. And of course, manipulation is a term that has some connotations attached to it. But yes, Joe Biden said, I endorse Kamala. Kamala Harris said, I'm running. Donors said, we like it, and poured in record money, which I'll talk about in a moment. And that's where we are right now. So while I am absolutely on the side of let everyone who wants this come forward, let them lobby the delegates, let there be a discussion at the convention if indeed there is disagreement, I don't think that there is any way to force that. And in fact, it's almost seeming, given the degree to which and the energy which has been displayed behind Kamala Harris saying, I'll do it, and the money pouring in and the enthusiasm, it actually seems like it would be more forced at this point to create some kind of contested situation that simply doesn't exist. And I know a lot of people won't like that. They'll say, wait, the Kamala Harris manipulated the situation too, because she said she's considering as VP some of the people who might run against her. Yeah, it's called politics. I mean, that's kind of the way this thing works. And it seems to me that the priority now that record money is pouring into Kamala Harris's campaign is let's figure out how to make her the next president rather than Donald Trump, because it's seeming like those are the two options. I know that there are people who are still saying, I would rather it be Gretchen Whitmer. It doesn't seem Gretchen Whitmer's doing it. First, before any of this, you've got to convince Gretchen Whitmer to say, I'd be interested. And it doesn't seem like that is going to happen. Now, Kamala Harris putting out a statement where she says, when I announced my campaign for president, I said I intended to go out and earn this nomination. Tonight, I'm proud to have secured the broad support needed to become our party's nominee. And as a daughter of California, I'm proud that my home state's delegation helped put our campaign over the top. I look forward to formally accepting the nomination soon. I'm grateful to President Biden and everyone in the Democratic Party who has already put their faith in me, and I look forward to taking our case directly to the American people. This election will present a clear choice between two different visions. Trump wants to take our country back to a time before many of us had full freedoms and equal rights. I believe in a future that strengthens our democracy, protects reproductive freedom, and ensures every person has the opportunity to not just get by, but to get ahead. Over the next few months, I'll be traveling, talking to Americans, etc., all to defeat Donald Trump. This is where we are. And while I am disgusted by the campaign finance status quo in the United States, it cannot be ignored that there is record money pouring into Kamala Harris's campaign. And I want to talk about that next. MAGA and Trump are in a panic. Not only is Donald Trump reportedly regretting and second guessing his choice of JD Vance as his vice presidential running mate. You'll see why when I show you clips of their joint interview on Fox News last night in a moment. But the money that is pouring in behind Kamala Harris, hundreds of millions of dollars, if you include her campaign combined with the political action committees. Now, I hate the fact that our elections are guided by donations in this way. I find PACs and super PACs disgusting. I want to completely change in almost every way how politics is funded in the United States. And I also can't ignore that under the status quo, when you see this amount of money pour in, it signals significant enthusiasm. Report from the Associated Press. Kamala Harris smashes fundraising record with a stunning $81 million haul over 24 hours. These are incredible numbers. This includes money raised across the campaign, DNC, and joint fundraising committees. This is the largest 24-hour sum reported by either side in the 2024 campaign. Listen to this. Hours earlier, Future Forward, the largest super PAC in Democratic politics, announced it had secured $150 million in commitments at the same time from donors who were previously stalled, uncertain, or uncommitted. Of course, this reports what we already know. This puts Kamala Harris in a dominant position to secure the Democratic Party's formal nomination next month. One of the most delightful things here, is that the Trump team, after Trump's conviction, which they said this is the biggest fundraising boon in American history, the conviction will come back to haunt them and blah, 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 all that stuff. They said we raised $70 million in 48 hours, 70 million in 48 hours, which they considered the epic, incontrovertible sign of the inevitable momentum of Trump's campaign. We now have Kamala Harris raising $81 million in half the time, $11 million more dollars in half the time. Really incredible stuff. Trump, widely triggered, losing his mind. This guy is off the rails and he realizes this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. He was ready to run against Joe Biden. He spent all of the RNC last week, he and Republicans, attacking Joe Biden. And now it's not even the person you're going to be running against. Trump posting to Truth Central, quote, Joe Biden will go down as the worst president in the history of the United States. Kamala, our horrible and incompetent border czar, will be worse. When he says will be worse, it almost sounds like he's conceding she's going to win. Here is the big announcement about the fundraising haul on Fox News. Take a listen to this.
Breaking right now, Vice President Harris's campaign, which just began today, has announced a whopping $81 million fundraising haul since she entered the race. That is the largest 24-hour total of any candidate in U.S. history.
Take a listen to that. Now, importantly, we do have to break down who the money came from, because Lara Trump, who now is co-chair of the RNC, she claims, fine, 81 million bucks, but it's from millionaires and billionaires, which is very much not true. And I want to talk about that in a moment.
And obviously, raising money is a big part of this whole process, and that is an impressive haul for the new candidate on the Democrat side.
Yeah, well, Martha, we heard a lot about the donors, obviously, on the Democrat side, who were saying, hey, we're not giving any money because we don't trust that Joe Biden actually has a shot at beating Donald Trump. And they really questioned whether he was mentally able to be president for 4 more years. So clearly, these are a lot of people who I think were probably holding back their money. And now they're coming out and they're saying, OK, you guys got rid of Joe. Now we're going to put our money behind the candidate. And the sad thing, I think, to me, Martha, is, yeah, that's a big number. But these are these millionaires and billionaires people have to remember out there who are willing to do anything to stop Donald Trump, no matter how bad it might be for this country. And quite frankly, I can't think of something more frightening than Joe Biden running the country, except for maybe Kamala Harris as the president of the United States.
So think about how many important things, these are not minor details, Lara Trump gets wrong there. First of all, the idea that it's millionaires and billionaires donating to Kamala Harris. Lara Trump has to know you can't donate more than about $3,000 in this way. You can make big donations to super PACs, but that's not what the $81 million is. I believe that the limit used to be $2,900. It might be $3,300 now. That's the maximum that you're actually allowed to donate. We know that the $81 million came from 880,000 individual donors, not millionaires. That's an average of a $92 donation each. You can only donate a few $1,000 to the campaign per year per candidate. So as co-chair of the RNC, she knows that. But there's another part of this. When she says it's just millionaires and billionaires donating to Kamala Harris because they don't want Donald Trump to be president of the United States, Trump has said, we've got to do good things for people like Elon Musk. He said it at the last rally that he held over the weekend. And importantly, if she wants to talk about millionaires and billionaires pouring money in for a candidate, Elon Musk has now committed $45 million per month, $45 million per month to help Donald Trump get elected between now and the election. It is not millionaires and billionaires that are primarily donating to Kamala Harris. It's nearly 1 million people donating an average of $92 each. Now, I will tell you, my guess is that average is even lower if you take out the people who did donate the max. If you take out the relatively small number of people that can afford to do the $3,300, you probably end up with an average donation that is far, far lower, probably in the $40 or $50 range from the estimates that I've read online. So Trump has made it clear he's going to do good things for people like Elon Musk. Elon Musk, the billionaire, has made it clear he's going to pour money into Donald Trump. And we have nearly 1 million grassroots donors here that have contributed to Kamala Harris's campaign. Lara Trump has to know she's lying, right? Like she's not ignorant to the contribution limit. You have to assume, since she's co-chair of the RNC, she must simply be lying. It doesn't seem to be working, as the fundraising numbers are extraordinary. The next question is what happens to the polling. We are seeing early post-Biden saying I'm not doing it polling. It's mixed right now. Let's give it a week and see where we are. We'll take a very quick break and then be back with the joint JD Vance Trump interview that's making MAGA insiders question the selection of JD Vance. I always get hot when I sleep. It's plagued me my whole life, but I found the solution, and it is 8 Sleep. Our sponsor, 8 Sleep, has released the newest model of the Pod, the incredible device that fits right over your mattress like a fitted sheet. It can cool down your bed to just 20 degrees below the room temperature, or it can heat your bed up, which can be useful in the winter or for muscle relaxation. I keep mine on the cold setting. It is a great feeling to sleep with one of these. I just wake up more refreshed, and science has shown that lowering your body temperature at night can let you sleep better and feel better the next day. And 8 Sleep's new model, the Pod 4 Ultra, has a revolutionary new feature. It can detect when you are snoring and lift your head so that you can breathe better. Pod 4 Ultra also introduces an adjustable base that fits between your mattress and your bed frame to add reading and sleeping positions. Go to 8sleep.com/Pacman. Use code Pacman to get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. The David Pakman Show is an audience-supported program. Consider grabbing a membership at joinpakman.com. Get the full experience, including the commercial-free audio and video feeds of the show, the daily bonus show, access to the soundboard, invitations to members-only town hall events, and a lot more. And the pleasure of knowing that you're supporting an alternative to what we get from corporate media every day. Grab a membership at joinpakman.com. Behind the scenes, we are hearing that Donald Trump is increasingly displeased with having chosen JD Vance to be his running mate. JD Vance is a doormat, which is what Donald Trump wants, someone that he can walk all over. But he's already showing that he is cringe-worthily uncharismatic in every way. Vance and Trump sat down for their first joint interview with Fox News' Jesse Waters. It aired last night, and it's really, really bad. And before we dig into it in earnest, I actually want to play this very short clip, because by their own new standards, here is Donald Trump inciting violence.
If we don't win this election, we may never have another election. I'm telling you, this may be our last election.
Okay. They have been arguing now for 10 days since the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. They've been arguing that saying things like, democracy depends on this election. Trump is a threat to democracy. Vote for, then it was Biden, now it's Harris. Vote for Biden or Harris to preserve democracy. They argue that that led to a Republican shooting at Donald Trump. It's idiotic, but it's what they're claiming. But here is Trump saying the exact same thing. If I don't win, this could be the final election we ever have. Their standard that they generated since the assassination attempt of Donald Trump identifies that sort of claim as an incitement to violence. But of course, they don't really believe that. It's just they say it when they see it as a way to attack the left, and otherwise they don't care. Now let's get into some of the more thick and meaty parts of this completely bogus interview gone outrageously wrong. Trump argues, sort of, if you can understand him, and even JD Vance seems, you know how Trump sometimes seems visibly confused by the things he's saying? Well, throughout this interview, JD Vance is visibly confused by the things Donald Trump is saying. Here's Trump saying something about Secret Service detail and security failure.
Did we have enough people? Why didn't we have enough people? Somebody said that a lot of people were put on Biden's detail. The problem is Biden doesn't draw anybody. He draws flies. He draws nobody. And, you know, you don't need.
See that forced laugh there by JD Vance? Oh, my goodness. This, you know, everything they try to throw at the left comes back at them. And their new criticism, it's not a new criticism. Their revitalized criticism of Kamala Harris is that she laughs in a weird way, that she cackles. Now, this is funny in general, because if anyone's heard Tucker Carlson laugh, it's not exactly something to write home about. But JD Vance now, at a rally he held yesterday and during this interview, his forced laugh isn't exactly a pleasure to hear or see.
He doesn't draw anybody. He draws flies. He draws nobody. And, you know, you don't need very many people for that because he does not draw. He'll have 30 people show up, and we have 55, 60,000 people show up.
Right. And JD Vance, just look at him laughing there, just absolutely loves it. He's really playing the doormat. You know, Republicans for a while love to use the term NPC, non-player characters, sort of a reference to these background characters in video games that just react and behave in exactly the same way, no matter what it is that's happening in the game. JD Vance really epitomizes that. Now, Trump actually admits during this interview that for a while, JD was not the right guy for Trump. And what he's alluding to is the years and years and years of JD Vance criticizing Trump. And to be honest, they were pretty good criticisms. But then Trump basically says, now he's the doormat that I need.
Why did you pick JD Vance?
We've always had a good chemistry. And originally, JD was probably not for me, but he didn't know me. And then when we got to know each other, he liked me maybe more than anybody liked me. And he would stick up for me, and he'd fight for the worker as much as I fight for the worker. We just had an automatic chemistry.
It was just an automatic chemistry. It was like love at first sight, except for the fact that JD Vance spent 6 years attacking me in some of the most aggressive ways, including analogizing me to Hitler. But it was just chemistry. You know it when you feel it. I felt a tingle down my leg. Trump giving us his version of that. And then maybe the funniest part, whenever Trump has to pretend he's read anything is one of the funniest and most awkward moments simultaneously. And here is Trump pretending to know about JD Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy. And we all know Trump doesn't read. When he was asked about his favorite Bible passage, when he was asked about his favorite books, anytime Trump has to pretend like he's ever read a book in his adult life, it gets awkward. And it gets awkward
And
here.
he wrote a book which was a classic, as you know, and it was all about the working men and women and how they aren't being treated fairly, and he was right about that, and I understood that maybe better than anyone else, and we just have had a great relationship.
Trump has not had to work a day in his entire life, and he wants us to believe that he and JD Vance are united in understanding the plight and strife of the average worker, despite the fact that not JD Vance, but Trump has spent his entire life trying to remain isolated and insulated from the very workers he claims to represent. Now, if you think the JD Vance Trump joint interview on Fox News was bad, just wait until you see JD Vance's first big boy rally last night. We have a Donald Trump that is in complete and total meltdown. He wasted all of last week with the Republican Party, attacking a guy in Joe Biden who is no longer his opponent. He's now the oldest presidential candidate in American history, running against a younger, smarter, more energetic Kamala Harris, who has secured the delegates she needs to be the Democratic nominee. He is regretting the choice of JD Vance.
We've endorsed JP, right? JD Mandel.
JD Vance showing himself to be awkward, not funny, a weird laugh, which is what they're attaching to Kamala Harris, unable to connect with people in any real way. And this was brought to the surface in stark contrast to Kamala Harris's recent public event in Middletown, Ohio. Here is JD Vance with some giga cringe. If you're allergic to cringe, tune away from this because it's bad, suggesting that they, I guess he means the left, will call his consumption of Mountain Dew racist.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
Yeah.
But
that should be a Kamala Harris campaign ad. It doesn't really need anything else. Just like, this is what you want? Do you want this guy? And even the friendly crowd kind of like, ooh, I don't know about this. I'm really not sure. They are, of course, pushing the line that Joe Biden dropping out is an attack on democracy. Now, last week they said, when you call something an attack on democracy, you're inciting violence. Calling Trump a threat to democracy is what instigated the shooting against Trump, despite the fact that the shooters are Republican. Doesn't make any sense. And here is JD Vance saying Biden dropping out is an attack on democracy, even though you may recall JD Vance said if he were vice president in January of 2021, he would not have certified the 2020 election, which is, of course, the real threat to democracy. JD Vance is not good at this. And reports from inside MAGA are that they are very concerned with JD Vance's presence on the campaign trail.
is going on in this country is absolutely disgraceful. Let me get a little philosophical here. I imagine most of you did not vote for Joe Biden. And if you did, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. But if you want to run for president, you've got to make your case to voters. You make your case to voters. That's what President Trump did, even though he would have already been the president. And even though he was by far the most popular person in the Republican Party, he ran for the Republican presidential nomination. He faced some good competition, and he made his case to voters. The idea of selecting the Democrat Party's nominee because George Soros and Barack Obama and a couple of elite Democrats got in a smoke-filled room and decided to throw Joe.
There's always a rich Jewish man behind the scenes somewhere. All paths lead back to that.
Biden overboard. That is not how it works. That is a threat to democracy, not the Republican Party, which is fighting for democracy every.
You know, I highly doubt whether he really had a Diet Mountain Dew because those have a fair bit of caffeine. And I can't imagine that JD Vance would be this low energy. Now, if you want to make the argument that there are undemocratic things going on, we can, of course, deal with that head on. I do think there is a question, and I brought this up months ago. Would Democratic voters be resentful if they vote for Biden in a primary? It's a half-baked primary. When you have an incumbent, you don't really have a primary, much like Republicans didn't in 2020. Would Democratic voters rather be resentful that the ones that voted in the primary voted for Biden, and then Biden's not the nominee and it's somebody else? It's a very fair question. Absolutely fair question. I think it is significantly mitigated as a question, number one, in evidence of the number of dollars that is pouring in for Kamala Harris. You don't get record money pouring in if people are resentful of your candidacy. That's number one. And then number two, people voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. And so to some degree, it's not some random governor that's being injected as the Democratic nominee. It is Kamala Harris who is part of the ticket. So I think it's quite mitigated. But if you want to make this argument, you also can't ignore that in 2020, Republicans didn't even have a primary. Was it democratic in that sense not to allow Republicans to truly have a say as to whether they wanted Donald Trump running for re-election? So needless to say, these are rhetorical arguments. I don't think they're very strong. and I don't think they're going to go anywhere. Now, JD Vance also sort of following Trump's lead, telling a bunch of lies during his rally in Ohio yesterday, including lying that Trump opposed the Iraq war. As you know, and as we've said many times, we've played the video, Donald Trump said to Howard Stern that he would have gone into Iraq. But here's JD Vance just lying about it.
And in 2003, and look, it was a Republicans and Democrats, a lot of people supported this. I'm not just beating up on the other side. But
right.
In 2003, we went to war in Iraq. And remember, it was supposed to be just a few weeks, and then everything would be over. And I was an 18-year-old kid. I supported it, and I was wrong. And you know who was right? President Donald J. Trump. He knew. He somehow knew, even though he was a real estate developer in New York, that this thing would become a quagmire.
Yeah, of course, that's not true at all. Trump, after the fact, started to pretend that he had always been against the Iraq war, but you can find the clips on my channel. You can find it online. Trump making it clear to Howard Stern that he would indeed have gone into Iraq. And then finally, this speech went so terribly, that even Fox News cut away. This was meant to be JD Vance's big coming out party where he was going to charm the crowd with his charisma and jokes and everything. It didn't go well, and Fox News making the call to cut away early.
Actually swimming at the swimming pool, and somebody brought over their phone and showed me the news that Joe Biden had.
All right, you've been listening to JD Vance giving his first solo speech since becoming Donald Trump's running mate. 9 days after the attempted assassination of the former president, a packed crowd there in his hometown, in his high school. John, a remarkable moment.
Yeah, really, it's so remarkable that we're cutting away. An absolutely terrible candidate, JD Vance, and reports that Trump is furious that he is now stuck with a guy who seems to be unable to do anything to help Trump, particularly in this new context where it is Kamala Harris, not Joe Biden, that Trump will likely be up against. Let me know what you think. info@davidpakman.com, and make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support The David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. I'm not going to lie, I picked up on the whole Trump's too old to be president thing after Joe Biden announced he's not running for re-election as a complete and total joke. It's obvious satire. As I told you yesterday, I posted this to my Twitter account and I said, is it really what the country needs right now to have the oldest presidential nominee ever be president of the United States? It doesn't seem good. It was just satire. It was just meant to trigger these right wingers, but it's not really why I don't support Trump. There's 1,000 reasons why I don't support Trump, and they have to do with policy, and they have to do with so many other things. But it turns out that this is being really picked up on by right-wing media, and they are so wildly triggered and furious about the fact that it is only accurately being pointed out now. Trump becomes the oldest nominee in American history based on the fact that Joe Biden has dropped out. It really started as a joke, and there is a real what is wrong with this guy kind of situation going on as the focus becomes Trump's regularly mangled speeches and confused statements. But here's Dana Perino yesterday on Fox News saying all of a sudden they're talking about Trump's too old. This is not going to work. She doesn't seem to get that it started as an obvious joke, but it's kind of working. So maybe it is a good idea.
What happened is like the Democrats have this bat signal that goes out, like, here's the new talking point. Mm-hmm. So after saying that Joe Biden was perfectly fine and his age didn't matter at all, and he runs circles around them at the White House. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, this memo basically goes out that says Trump is...
By the way, when the word basically doing a lot of heavy lifting, a memo basically goes out. Now, we all just realized it's really funny that now we can just focus on Trump's age the way they've been focusing on Biden's age, and they can't go, well, your guy's even older. because Kamala Harris is 59 and they are furious.
This memo basically goes out that says Trump is now the oldest nominee in history. And it's so incredibly ridiculous because they actually seem to believe that cutesy ridiculousness like that might work. I don't think it's going to work.
Well, it started as a joke. If they weren't wildly triggered by it, it wouldn't work. But it's infuriating them so much, and it's reportedly getting back to Trump as well. The great thing about this is we on the left, we all know it's nonsense in the sense that Trump's age has nothing to do with why we aren't voting for him. It is also the case that there has been huge corporate media malpractice. Think about how since June 27th and Joe Biden's poor debate performance, there have been thousands of stories and likely tens of thousands of corporate media hours cumulatively devoted to Joe Biden's cognitive state, despite the fact that for years and since June 27th, every single speech and interview that Donald Trump gives is mangled and scrambled beyond recognition. He seems visibly confused and nonsensical. The point of all of this, other than pointing out the absurdity of the media malpractice, is exactly to trigger them like this. They are furious. And part of the reason they're furious is because it's simply true. Donald Trump is the oldest nominee in history and seems to have lost his marbles. They aren't thrilled that there is no retort to, you guys have the oldest nominee ever. And you've been talking about how Biden's too old. You have the oldest nominee ever. Trump's entire identity and way of doing campaigning is focused on the shortcomings of others. And there's really no retort to your guy is the oldest guy ever. He wears lifts in his shoes. He paints his face orange. He dyes his hair. He's falling asleep in public all the time. They know this is a liability when the contrast is high energy Kamala Harris. And there's a bunch of articles that are now coming out about this. Ann Applebaum has a really good piece in The Atlantic called "Suddenly Trump Looks Older and More Deranged." Now the Republicans are the ones saddled with a candidate who can't make a clear argument or finish a sentence. It kind of started as satire when I tweeted it, but it is being picked up on as a serious story. In Barron's from AFP News by Camille Camdesis, Trump's age and fitness arguments backfire with Joe Biden's exit. This is sort of something we stumbled upon, but it is already working really well to put them on the defensive, and we should continue it. And meanwhile, you've got to see what they're going after Kamala Harris with. Yesterday, I told you they have nothing on Kamala Harris. They're going after her laugh. Hannity did a montage of how Kamala Harris laughs. That's how they're going after her because they don't have anything to go after her at all. There's a new attack line. And this one was actually previewed by none other than JD Vance back when he was running for Senate. When he was running for Senate, JD Vance appeared with the then Fox News host Tucker Carlson. And he said the real problem with Kamala Harris is she is childless. She doesn't have her own biological children, and sort of chalks her up to a crazy cat lady.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable, too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Now, a couple different things there. AOC is quite young. And so the fact that she has no children at this point, I don't know if she wants kids. I don't know if she's medically able to have kids. We know nothing at all about AOC, but she's quite young. Isn't she like 30? I don't think it's really crazy that she doesn't have kids. Pete Buttigieg now does have kids. Now, of course, they'll say, well, are they biologically? I don't even know. I think that Pete Buttigieg and his husband adopted kids that are not biologically theirs, but who cares? The point is, JD Vance says he doesn't have kids. Now he does. But with regard to Kamala Harris, they are now picking up on this. In the absence of anything other than the way she laughs to attack her with, they are now picking up on the attack that JD Vance previewed for us years ago. Right-wing bomb-throwing extremist Laura Loomer tweeted out yesterday. She put out a tweet on Twitter, or we might call it an excretion on X, where she says it's time for Republicans to start talking about Kamala Harris's sexual history and the reason why she likely doesn't have any children of her own. I'm willing to bet she's had so many abortions that she damaged her uterus. A woman who has no biological children of her own should not be allowed to make decisions in the White House for your children. Republicans need to run with this messaging and ask why a woman with no kids of her own and a scarred up uterus is so obsessed with wanting to kill your babies. Kamala has zero investment in the future, but she wants to determine our future. Now, not only is this horribly stupid and misogynistic, oh, how could it be misogynistic if a woman, Laura Loomer, is saying it? You can be a minority racially and be racist. You could be an anti-Semitic Jew. You could be a homophobic gay person. It doesn't really matter. But more importantly, expand Laura Loomer's argument for a moment and realize how stupid it is. Should Trump, who has never served in the military and whose children have not served in the military, get to make any decisions about what members of the military do? He's going to put people in harm's way, soldiers, without ever having served himself or having had kids who served. He doesn't understand what it's like to be sent somewhere or to have your child. As you can see, it's an argument for functionally disabling a president from doing anything at all. And they know it. It's idiotic, but it's what they're going with. And why? Because they have nothing else. They have nothing else to attack Kamala Harris with. They'll come up with new stuff. Trust me, they're working on it. But so far, it's she doesn't have, they have to clarify, biological kids because she's stepmom to Doug Emhoff's kid or kids. I don't even know their family situation. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. So they have to go with biological children. And she cackles when she laughs. That's what they have right now. Increased reporting is pointing to Donald Trump and the people around him realizing that JD Vance as a running mate was a very, very bad idea. Interesting article from yesterday in NJ.com, NewJersey.com. Inside Team Trump, was JD Vance a mistake? And the article explains how with the changing dynamics of the race, including Joe Biden stepping aside and the likely replacement of Biden on the Democratic ticket with Kamala Harris, that the dynamics of this are not so good. And it actually points out that the shock of Biden's departure is changing this from a race that people around Trump thought was all but over into one where they don't know how to defeat Kamala Harris. And it's unclear whether JD Vance is useful in trying to achieve that defeat of Kamala Harris. We also have an article from the New Republic, why Trump suddenly thinks picking JD Vance was a mistake. Joe Biden's decision to drop out and endorse Harris to succeed him on the Democratic ticket has Trump's team scrambling. Much of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, including picking JD Vance, was structured around attacking Biden. But then Biden announces he's withdrawing. Trump campaign officials acknowledge Trump selected the inexperienced Vance to boost his own base, not to extend a hand to swing voters, according to The Atlantic. Now, of course, there are real new questions. JD Vance's youth, which maybe seemed like an advantage in contrast to Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, compared to Kamala Harris and the likely running mates that she's considering, it all of a sudden doesn't really seem particularly advantageous. So I don't think for a second that Trump and the people around him think it's viable or plausible to replace JD Vance at this point. It seems once again like the risk to keeping Vance is lower than the risk to replacing Vance. But we are really left to wonder, does JD Vance bring anything to a Trump-Vance ticket against a revitalized Democratic ticket that includes Kamala Harris at the top and presumably some competent Democrat running alongside her, who we will probably find out very soon? I don't really know what he brings. Remember that Vance was chosen because he's a doormat. He has pledged loyalty to Trump after doing a total 180 since his comments about Trump years ago, and because he's young. And neither of those at this point is a reasonable boost when you think of a revitalized Democratic campaign. So he is stuck with Vance as near as I can tell. And there is probably, if I were Kamala Harris, I would be really thinking, I don't know that Trump or Vance are going to debate. They may even pull the whole, the Harris ticket is illegitimate, it's undemocratic, so we're not going to debate. But at least given that there might be a debate, one of the considerations I would have if I were Kamala Harris, even though in some bigger picture debates, quote, don't matter, there's a lot of optics here that do matter. Who would be best suited to wipe the floor with JD Vance in a vice presidential debate? I don't know who the answer is, but it's clear that the Harris team is actively looking. Let me know who you think Vice President Harris should select as her running mate, specifically to make JD Vance look particularly vapid and useless. info@davidpakman.com. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We've sort of been wondering what the hell happened to Elon Musk, who seems to have launched himself completely into MAGA world, fighting what he has described as the woke mind virus. We seem to maybe have figured it out. In a completely bonkers, off-the-wall interview with Jordan B. Peterson, Elon Musk said that his son is dead and was killed by the woke mind virus. Now, we would laugh if this weren't so tragic, because what Elon seems to be talking about is that one of his male biological kids is trans, and that the transition sort of explains why Elon has apparently lost his mind politically, and also is saying that his son died and was taken by the woke mind virus. This is tragic stuff. Not a supportive father, that's for sure. But it might be some insight into what has happened to Elon Musk. Take a listen to this disturbing couple minutes of video.
It happened to one of my older boys, where I was essentially tricked into signing documents for one of my older boys, Xavier.
Now, I want to stop right there. This is supposedly one of the biggest geniuses the world has ever known. And he was tricked with some paperwork because COVID was confusing. It's already completely whacked, but let's continue.
This is before I had really any understanding of what was going on, and we had COVID going on, and so there was a lot of confusion. I was told, Xavier might commit suicide if he.
That was a lie right from the outset.
Incredibly evil, and I agree with you that people that have been promoting this should go to prison.
That's
so I was tricked into doing this, it wasn't explained to me that puberty blockers are actually just sterilization drugs. And so I lost my son, essentially. They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right, so the reason it's called dead naming is because...
by the way, puberty blockers are not sterilization drugs. This is so crazy, but I'm trying to kind of keep the narrative going here.
Your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead. Killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
And then Jordan Peterson, of course, also on the verge of tears, which is sort of a necessary element of any interview like this.
Yeah. So...
yeah, and there's lots of people in that situation now.
Right.
It's not pretty, and lots of demolished kids.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be the final straw. All right, so let's...
So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that. And we're making some progress.
Join the club.
Join the club. This is whacked. This, Wow. Wow. Now, there's a few different things here. Elon Musk's reaction when a child is struggling with something doesn't sound like a particularly useful reaction. He says he was tricked by doctors, but as far as we know, Elon Musk's now daughter doesn't have transition regret. So in what way was it a trick? Because from what it sounds like it is being said, Elon Musk's daughter is satisfied with the decision to transition. And Elon is the one who's saying it's tantamount to being dead. It's the same as if my child were dead. Now, Elon then followed this up with a tweet where he said, quote, Xavier was born gay and slightly autistic, two attributes that contribute to gender dysphoria. I knew that from when he was about 4 years old, and he would pick out clothes for me to wear like a jacket and tell me it was fabulous, as well as his love of musicals and theater. But he was not a girl. There is so much going on here that we couldn't possibly unpack it. But we have a political dynamic to this, which is that Elon Musk moved his businesses to Texas, is kind of cavorting with the right-wing Texas governor and seems to have been sucked into this right-wing pipeline. He regularly says that they need to destroy what he considers to be the woke mind virus, and will be donating $45 million a month to Donald Trump between now and the election. And we've been wondering what the hell happened here. We're getting an answer. And what seems to have happened is that having a trans child played a major, I can't say it's the only, but played a major role in sending Elon Musk into this spiral. So it's a sad thing to see, also because kids need their parents. And it sounds like Elon is saying his own child is now dead to him because of this transition. Crazy stuff, and tragically sad. We have new reporting that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. effectively offered to sell his endorsement of Trump to Donald Trump in exchange for a job in Trump's administration. We have all been thinking about that interesting phone call that was filmed shortly after the failed assassination attempt against Donald Trump, where Trump and RFK were on the phone. RFK was reportedly mortified that it was published, but it was. And one of the things that happened in that phone call is that Trump said extraordinarily anti-vaccine things that we never previously knew he believed. And of course, RFK seemed to love it. At one point, Trump says, "We're going to win." And RFK says, yeah, and we still don't really know the meaning of that. What did RFK mean by what was RFK's interpretation of we? Does RFK consider himself a supporter of Trump behind the scenes? We just don't know. But now we have new reporting from the Washington Post. RFK Jr. floated a job in a Trump White House as he weighed endorsing Trump. The independent candidate suggested being given a senior job overseeing a portfolio of health and medical issues, an idea that the Trump campaign rejected. Now, we will link to this article, but what it explains in short is that RFK, in not particularly subtle terms, said, I would consider endorsing Trump and effectively ending his presidential bid in exchange for the promise of a job overseeing medical and health issues as part of a forthcoming Trump administration. And again, reportedly, according to the Washington Post article, the Trump team saw it as too overtly being a quid pro quo where they didn't go for it. It didn't seem like there was any moral or ethical dilemma. I think they would have gladly accepted the endorsement from RFK, and with increased questions as to whether RFK's presence helps or hurts Donald Trump, getting him out of the way with an endorsement would be a pretty useful thing. But it seemed as though the Trump campaign realized it's so overtly a quid pro quo that it is probably not a good idea to go forward with this. The discussions began hours after the attempted assassination of Trump at the July 13th rally. The article says it did not result in an agreement amid concerns in Trump's orbit of the complication of promising a job in exchange for an endorsement. Kennedy says he plans to continue his campaign. We are in it to win it, unless Trump offers him a job, in which case he would end it and endorse Donald Trump. A person familiar with the conversation said someone who knows both of them contacted Kennedy just hours after the assassination attempt of Trump. And after Kennedy had cable news appearances to talk about the attack, Kennedy said he was open to speaking with Trump. Kennedy then was on a group text with Tucker Carlson and a phone number known to be used by Trump. That led to the phone call between Trump and Kennedy, a piece of which leaked. They agreed to meet in person at the RNC. Trump has reportedly been intrigued by Kennedy, even as he publicly criticized him. So listen, this is all. I know that there are people who see RFK as the epitome of principle and all of it, but it seems increasingly clear that this is all kind of a play for attention and maybe some power. And listen, lots of people would want that. We talk about opportunism as if it's just a bad thing. Opportunism and ambition and, who am I to say it's good or it's bad? I think it's important to see it through the prism of if someone is motivated by personal ambition and the desire to be adjacent to power, then it's reasonable to question whether they would have the best interests of the average American in mind. I think that's a fair thing. Now, to that end, I believe RFK believes everything he says. I think he believes everything he says about, for example, vaccines. I don't have any reason to doubt that. But increasingly, we have this kind of growing picture of, listen, I'll run because I think that's how to get attention right now. But maybe a better way would be to endorse Trump and to get myself some kind of cushy gig. Now, as far as polling goes, we have some early polling now accounting for Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden. And in some of that polling, RFK Jr. is polling around 9%. That's a SoCal research poll, RFK 9. We have a Quinnipiac University poll where it is RFK 6. And then we also have, I guess that's the newest that we have that involves Harris at the top of the ticket. So as I've said before, if I were a betting man, which I am not, I would bet RFK ends up with under 5% of the vote by the time it is all said and done. But I'd be curious what his supporters would say about the reported willingness to essentially sell a nomination of Trump for a job in the administration. Let me know what you think. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about the hearing involving the head of the Secret Service yesterday. Really wild and intense stuff. We are going to talk about the hijab ban for French Olympians in the Paris Olympics, which some are saying is a form of discrimination. And we will talk about the continued fallout from Delta canceling additional hundreds of flights, chaotic and insane anecdotes that have sprung forward. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. Get instant access. I'll see you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. If you snore at night or you get hot when you sleep, check out our sponsor, 8 Sleep, who just released the Pod 4 Ultra. It can cool your bed down to 20 degrees below the room temperature so you get better sleep, or it can heat your bed up, and it can sense when you're snoring and lift your head so you can breathe better. It's truly amazing. I use an 8 Sleep pod every night. Once you try it, you'll understand how big of a difference it makes for sleep. Go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman for $350 off. The link is in the description.